Hi, Democrats. Today is Thursday, November 30th, and it's time for the Chair's Daily Live. Happy Thursday. Okay, so today is Thursday. There's a lot to cover. I have been out and about today, and so I haven't been watching TV or paying attention to local news. So I might be a little bit dated, but roll with me on this one, okay? So today I spent time celebrating the life of Bishop Carlton Pearson. It's a life well lived and a life celebrated with events happening all today and some tomorrow. And as I was there reflecting on the happenings of the day and the happenings of our state, it occurred to me while I was there celebrating the life and legacy of Bishop Carlton Pearson across the state. Philip Hancock was the life of Philip Hancock was being taken in the name of the state of Oklahoma. He was executed today, though the Pardon and Parole Board had recommended clemency. The state decided to stick with its schedule of continuing execution, of basically clearing the rolls of all the folks who are who have been sentenced to death. We've made the decision that we're just going to keep clearing the rolls, even if circumstances have changed, even if the Pardon and Parole Board says that there's not enough evidence or that they recommend clemency. We're just going to keep going with the executions. And I know that I am not speaking for everyone, but I'm the one with the camera right now, and I just have to say that it is unsettling. It is unsettling. Having never served on the Pardon and Parole Board, not being qualified to do that, it's a group of people who decided on clemency, and we opted not to do it. And I wonder why have the board if we're not going to listen. But November 30th, and so I have to remind you that today is the last day of Family Month that the governor declared at the beginning of this month with explanation or not telling us the incentive, but just to use it as an excuse, as an attempt to gain to gain eyeballs, to get more press, right? So he had a whole ceremony that was an acknowledgement of indigenous people, indigenous families, but he didn't invite any of the leaders of the largest tribes in our state. And so were you celebrating those, or did you just want to say it? I question the sincerity of our governor's actions when he talks about family values and Family Month, when you consider that Oklahoma is in the bottom 5 of a lot of family indicators, as I've talked about quite a bit this month, where, 45 or higher in outcomes for children and outcomes for women, in education, in healthcare. And so it strikes me a little strange when he claims that Oklahoma is the most family value oriented state. I don't know. But I want to talk about something more positive. And so I want to join me. It's Thursday. And if it's Thursday, Representative Mickey Dollins will be joining us. So join me in inviting and welcoming Representative Mickey Dollins. How are you?
Hey, Alicia, I'm doing well. Hello, everyone. To everyone out there listening, it's great to be back on the show. I've missed the past few weeks, either with work commitments. Of course, we had Thanksgiving, or I've been under the weather like so many people have. But today I'm feeling great and happy to be on the show.
Well, I'm glad that you're back. I'm glad you're back, and you heard me talk about family values and the governor. Do you want to weigh in on that? Or I know you work at the Capitol, so you might not want to.
I mean, it's just an ongoing examples of the tone-deaf decisions that Governor Stitt continues to make when it comes to picking fights with the tribes and excluding important tribal leaders. I just read a tweet from Chief Hoskin of the Cherokee Nation that said, well, I'm sure that the governor's liaison just got the wrong address. A little tongue-in-cheek comment there, but unfortunately, it's just been a pattern over the past 8 nearly 8 years of the governor picking fights with the tribes and not building those bridges that so many Oklahomans want to see happen. Um, there was a poll just a few months ago that showed that a overwhelming amount, I think nearly 80% of Oklahomans view the tribes as Oklahoma's best friend.
Uh-oh. Let's,
Oh, there we go. And
there we go.
unfortunately, our governor is just not hearing what the people of Oklahoma want or are saying, which is build these bridges with the tribes, make sure that you're being communicative and inclusive, because they truly are our best assets. When we talk about tourism in Oklahoma, it's really tough sell to make. I think one of the toughest jobs in Oklahoma has got to be the director of tourism, or lieutenant governor, because you really got to fight for things in Oklahoma. Typically, if people want to go camping, I mean, you got the Ozarks in Arkansas. You want to go skiing, you've got New Mexico, Colorado. You want to go shopping, a lot of people go to Dallas. I mean, in Oklahoma, we've got the tribal nations and Native American culture, and that's a huge asset to our state and something that should be celebrated, not fought against every step of the way like the governor has done.
It's a lot. So I don't want to talk about the governor. I don't want to talk about Family Value Month or whatever he's called it. We're coming up. Tomorrow is December 1st, right? And in the first week of December, maybe I want to make sure that I have it. First week of December, bills from House Chamber are due. You're supposed to submit a list of bills that you intend to submit. Is that correct?
Yeah, my assistant and I, we've been working really hard on our bill filing and getting ideas all queued up and ready to go. A lot of my ideas are coming from constituent requests, but I'm really excited for the upcoming session because I think I have a lineup of bills that will be, most of them anyway, have strong bipartisan support. The ones that I think will face a little bit uphill challenge are ways in which I believe we can strengthen and protect the ballot initiative process. First off, I think I've spoken before, I would love for Oklahoma to expand that signature gathering window from 90 days to 180 days. This wouldn't require a state question. I checked with our legal team, and it can be accomplished through a regular House bill. And what this would do is allow for signature gatherers to go out to rural Oklahoma and be able to have the time to build a more grassroots coalition instead of the frantic rush of just 90 days, which makes the most sense. You've got to be in the spots that are most densely populated. And for Oklahoma, that typically means Oklahoma City and Tulsa. By expanding that window to 180 days, we're going to be able to get out in rural Oklahoma more, gather signatures from those folks, and then also decrease the influence of out-of-state money, which we know is so important in order to get a message out. We were talking digital ads, TV, radio, all of those things, posters, signs, all of that can be, would have to rely less on out-of-state money if we had more time to build a grassroots coalition with small donor contributions. And then in addition to that, the one other recommendation I'm filing to protect the ballot initiative process is that any state legislator that wants to increase that minimum threshold in order for a state question to pass, which we saw last year, a couple of examples were raising it from a 50% plus one simple majority to 60% or a super majority. And in order for that to pass, the question would have to pass by the same threshold in which they're wanting for future state questions to also pass. So if someone were to want to send a vote to the people to increase that threshold to 60%, then it would have to pass on the ballot by 60%, not just a simple majority. So I think that that's going to be a really strong safeguard in protecting the foundation of our democracy, which is one person, one vote, simple majority wins.
Well, the 90 days rule has always struck me because it barely gives the folks leading petition enough time to educate the voters. And so this will allow some time to be on the ground and educate voters. And as you said, it will incentivize petitioners to go into rural Oklahoma because now it would feel like they would have time to do it.
That's correct. And if my bill were to pass, it would be next year when it would go into effect. So I know a lot of people are excited about the minimum wage state question. That would still be subjected to the 90-day window. And I know that the grassroots team that's putting that together is prepared and ready to go out and collect 92,000 signatures in 90 days, which is just an incredible feat. But it requires fast pace, being out in the densely populated areas in order to even have a chance of meeting that extremely high threshold in that very limited window.
So talk to me about the Good Samaritan law that you're thinking about putting up.
Oh, that's a great question. So last year I passed the fentanyl test strip bill that cleared up any ambiguity around the legality of a fentanyl test strip. And now what this has allowed for nonprofits and the state, like the Department of Mental Health, is to be able to distribute fentanyl test strips along with the naloxone or the Narcan, and help people not overdose. We don't condone drug use, but we know that a person has to be alive in order to be rehabilitated. And the Good Samaritan law is an extension in that harm reduction lineup of bills. And what this would do is, currently in Oklahoma, we do have a Good Samaritan law, and that if you're a passerby and you see someone overdosing on the sidewalk, for example, and you call the police and you stay there, like, you're not going to be complicit in that crime. Why would you be? It doesn't make any sense. However, Oklahoma is just about 1 out of 8 states that doesn't have a very important extension on that Good Samaritan law. And that means that if someone were partaking in drugs or they had illegal drugs on them, and the person that they're with is overdosing, if they were to call the police and the ambulance, first responders right now, and they were to show up and this person were to be there administering care to this person, the person who was also doing the drugs, who called the police, is typically arrested and charged with an illegal crime for having drugs or partaking in drugs. And so what this bill would do is give them a legal immunity, and knowing that even if they're currently on drugs or they have drugs on them, illegal drugs, and they call the police to save their friend, they call the paramedics to save their friend, they're not going to be charged with a crime. And having talked to leaders on this, like Drew Cook from Shed the Stigma, it's such a common issue that oftentimes people will try to take life-saving measures into their own hands. And unfortunately, so many times it ends up in a fatality because the person that they're with is too afraid to call the police in fear of being arrested.
Right. This is an instance where folks are like dumping people off at the emergency room without any explanation because they're afraid of getting arrested, or where they're not calling the police because they're afraid of getting arrested and lives are being lost. And so if your bill became a law, there would be more of an incentive to call an ambulance to save that life.
That's right. Yeah, that's correct. And the hurdle that we have, I mean, this is a bipartisan bill I've been working with Representative Daniel Pay on, is, the same questions that are going to come up with this are the same ones that came up with the fentanyl test strip bill, or the Clean Needle Exchange program. By allowing this, or by giving legal immunity to someone who's partaking in illegal drugs, are you condoning that drug use? And no, the answer is no, we're not. We just aren't going to ignore the fact that there's a fentanyl crisis, that there's an opioid crisis in Oklahoma, and that we're not going to ignore it. We're going to face it head on. And one of those issues is making sure that people feel safe and knowing that they can call paramedics, first responders, police, and get the people there with immediate medical attention and not face fear of also going to jail.
So it's true that we are kind of in the middle of a drug crisis, and it's multiple drugs, right? It's fentanyl. We're in the middle of a drug crisis. And so you're putting up a bill where where you'd like for us to map overdoses.
Yeah, so this is an OD map. So in other states, they've had a lot of success mitigating overdoses and bringing tools and resources to communities that are experiencing high rates of overdoses. And then also in some cases being able to track where the heroin or fentanyl opioids are actually coming from. But in order to do that, it requires for first responders to report the data of when and where an overdose took place. And when we have buy-in from not just a few counties, but all counties around the state of Oklahoma, then we can have essentially heat maps showing where the overdoses are taking place, and then call in the resources and wraparound services to address those communities to prevent more overdoses from happening.
Okay.
And
All
a
right.
good example of just to add a little bit more to that, whenever we were addressing missing and murdered Indigenous people several years ago when we passed IDA's law, which was named after one of my constituents, Lorinda Morgan's cousin, Ida Beard, a super important aspect of, finding missing people, not just in Oklahoma, but across the United States, is whenever there was remains of a person that was found, that DNA evidence would be put into a national database called NamUs, and it would cross-reference all these other different DNA samples. And if there wasn't a match, at least that DNA was in there. So, and this is very common, years, even months later, if there's some additional human remains that show up and those DNA samples are put into the database, it cross-references and there's a match. It's solving crimes that have gone unsolved for decades. And it's because we've got now buy-in from every state to put in this DNA evidence in this national database. And the more participation we have, instead of just these patchwork laws of, some states do it, some states don't, some counties do it, some counties don't, to have everyone buy in and put this important information into a database, we're being able to solve crimes that and give families closure that otherwise wouldn't have it. And I feel like this OD map database is a perfect example of something similar that can be accomplished. And in this case, mitigating drug overdoses, and then also locating the source of where the drugs are coming from.
Awesome. Okay, so I have a toss up. Which bill that I want to ask about next? How about the vexatious laws?
Oh, it's a great one. So vexatious laws are basically using the courts to weaponize control over, let's say, for example, an ex-spouse. If anyone's been through a divorce, they may have experienced a vindictive ex who continues to file false contempts, false lawsuits, just basically anything they can to create more wasted time, energy, money, resources, and going back to the courts. And what this would do is lay out guidelines for the judges to be able to say, no, there's been vexatious lawsuits, basically, which is another word for frivolous lawsuits. There's a pattern here. This person's not going to be allowed to continue dragging on this, these court hearings for years and years to come. And so it would put an end to that. It would put an end to people using the courts to weaponize and retain control over a spouse.
Now, is this isolated to the family court?
No, it's not isolated to family court, but from the people I've spoken to and constituents in District 93, it seems to be most prevalent in family court.
Like child custody stuff.
Child custody stuff. Yeah, it's a very common one for vexatious lawsuits to continue to arise year after year, even sometimes month after month. And from the experiences that I've heard from people, that it's most common in family court.
Okay. Well, those all sound good. And I know you have more, and we can talk about those next week. Thank you so very much for joining me. Do you have one more thing you want to talk about before we close today?
No, Alicia, I'm just really happy to be back on here. Thank you to everyone who's listened. This week, we're going to wrap up our 8 bills, and we're going to get those in. And I would be happy to talk about the remainder of the bills. And then also, I would give a little wrap up of the House Democratic Caucus. We've had our fall caucus retreat, and it went really well. We are getting everything ready to go with our priorities. and everything ready to go for session. And we're just looking forward to not only pushing our bills that we know are going to help Oklahomans, but also standing united together and defending marginalized communities and people who can't afford the lobbyists at the Capitol to advocate on their behalf. I know it's a very common theme within our caucus that we all agree on, which is to use our platforms to elevate the voices of our constituents. And if there's anything that you want us to be aware of, or if you want to connect, feel free to reach out to me on social media, or you can email me at mickey.dollins@okhouse.gov. And if I can't help you directly, I'll connect you to your legislator, or I can connect you to your municipal elected officials or our federal delegation. But thank you for taking a interest in civic engagement and for listening to Madam Chair Andrews' daily Facebook lives. They're extremely helpful. It's not easy, but she shows up each and every day to make sure everyone stays informed. And for that, we thank you.
Well, thank you for that. All righty, you guys have a great evening, and I'll be back here tomorrow at 4:15.
Take care.
Bye.